All right, so the Max exporter, this is a little different than most Max exporters. Now, in the usual Max way of doing things, there's this link here for exporters. Our exporter doesn't actually appear there. If I want to create a model to export, what I do is I create the object, but then I go over here to helper objects. Under helper objects, you'll find at the bottom exporters, and within that, I can create a WildPockets exporter object. Now, the reason we have an exporter object is that the exporter asks a lot of questions, and we want to be able to save the answers to those questions as part of the scene. Yep? No. To install these, there is a thing on our websites. Hang on a second. So here under support, you will find art exporters. So under the downloads section, you go get the right version of the exporter for your version of Max, and you drop, there's generally just one file in there. It's just a DLO file. And you drop that into the Max plugins directory. I'm going to cancel this right now because I've already done this. The other thing you have to do is there's this executable right here, curl, and you have to drop that into your Windows directory. And once you've installed those two files, you've got a working exporter. All right, so let me minimize that. So there it is. It's the exporter object. And as you can see here, I'm going to switch over to the Modify panel. It has this list of things that it's going to export. So when I hit that export button, it can actually create more than one model file or more than one animation file at a time. If you wanted to, you could create a little scene with a house and a tree, and you could say export the house to this file and export the tree to that file. Right now, I'm just going to add one thing to the list. And as you can see at the top, I've got a choice between model and animation. I'm going to put my user ID up in there. And I'm just going to call this a little box. Now, there's a lot of questions down here at the bottom of the dialog. The vast majority of that is not important. So, for example, I could export a subset of the scene. I could export just the one box. But most of the time, you're going to just export everything. And if you're exporting an animation, you could export a sub-range of the frames. But most of the time, you're just exporting the whole thing. You can set the mask. You can set script properties. But this is your basic export setup right here. And so what I do is I hit the export button, type in my password, and you see two little boxes popped up there. One of those represented the fact that it was uploading the model. The other one represented the fact that it was uploading a thumbnail. Now, if there had been a texture applied to that, it would have uploaded a third thing. Let me get the Max Materials property box. So what we use is just very basic stuff under maps. There are three maps here that we pay attention to: the diffuse map, the glossiness map, and the bump map. All of these should be either JPEGs or PNGs. The glossiness and the bump map should be JPEGs. The diffuse color can be a PNG if you want transparency. Otherwise, you probably want to stick with a JPEG.
And only use PNGs if you want transparency, or else you'll get some weird effects if it's not supposed to be.
All right, so let me apply a map to this thing. Bitmap. Let's see if he has any images on his desktop. Oh, look at that. It's the WildPockets logo. All right, make it visible in viewport, select the box, apply the property to the box, and there it is. All right, I'm going to export this, and it's going to probably turn out too big, but I'm going to show that to you. Oh, bloody. All right, hang on just a second. Our file server doesn't allow parentheses in file names. There we go. And back into Max, and back into the material properties. And now I can reapply this to the object. We should be good. All right, so this is one of the nice things about this exporter, is that when I'm ready to export again, if I make a mistake, I just go fix the mistake and then I hit the export button again. So it uploaded three things: the model, the thumbnail, and the texture. So now I can go back over to here And I'm going to log out as Ian, and I'm going to log in as me. And go into the builder. And it should be here in my library. All right, so there it is. And if I drag it in, what you'll probably discover is that it's humongous. In fact, it may have been so large that I have to zoom out in order to see it. Let me just go back into Max. We have, so it's actually not that big. It's 45 meters by 45 meters by 52 meters. So what I'm encouraging you to do is think about the scale of your objects when you're modeling them. We usually like to do things on a sort of a normal human scale. So if you wanted a box that came up to my knee, you'd make it 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, not 52. And the other thing you probably want to do is be careful about where you put it in the world. Generally, you want your objects to be centered on the world origin, and I like to use the move tool with a type in to get it right on the origin where it belongs. Here we go. So now I should be able to export it again. Now, one of the things you got to be careful about is that the builder will only load a model once. Having already loaded that model, it's not going to load it again. The only way to get it to load that model again is to reload the builder. So here we go, my models. Just drag that in. And the problem we were having before is that it was too large. And there we go. Alrighty. So next thing I want to show you is animation. You have two choices here. You can use bones or you can use bipeds. If you use either one, you have to use either the skin modifier or the physique modifier to apply the bones to the object. All of our animation is bone-based. If you want to animate something that you wouldn't normally think of as a rigged model, let's say a space shuttle, and you want to animate it flying up into the air, you still have to use bones. And the reason for this is that our animation files are just records of where the bones were. So it takes a snapshot every 30 times per second or something like that of the exact positions of the bones, and it records that out to the animation file. If your scene doesn't have bones, you get nothing at all in the animation file. So what you would do is you would put a single bone right into the middle of the space shuttle, and you'd animate the space shuttle by moving that one bone. All right. That's, I think, everything I want to show you for now. Any questions? You're right. I forgot to mention you're talking about collision solids, right? Yeah, I completely forgot to mention that. Okay, so in Max, collision solids are created using these atmospheric apparatus helpers. So they added this to Max with the intent that they could define the shape of particle systems, but they're just as good, and that's why they're called atmospheric, but they're just as good for defining the shapes of models. And there's three of them here: box, sphere, and cylinder. Don't use cylinder, it's not supported. You can put a box gizmo and line it up to the shape of your model. You can scale it, you can stretch it, you can rotate it. You cannot do that for a sphere. Spheres have to stay spheres. You can make them larger, but don't make them into ellipses. Don't chop them in half and make them into hemispheres. The engine won't handle that. All right. Unfortunately, you cannot connect collision solids to bones at the present time, which means you cannot animate them for now. Usually what you want to do, let's say you have a character, an animated character, and you want him to have collision. Generally what you would do is you would create a collision volume that sort of generally envelops his whole body, but don't be too specific about where the arms are. And that's about the best you can do for now. Alrighty, any other? Let's get to work.